Hello, Raiders. Welcome to ACT English section, commas, take 2. First, let's review the comma rules from last week. Fill in the blanks on your paper as I read. Teachers, you will probably want to pause the video after I get done reading so that the students have enough time to record the answers. Comma rule number 1. When in doubt, leave it out. This is the single most important rule to keep in mind when dealing with commas on the ACT. If you aren't sure if you need a comma, you probably don't need a comma. Teachers, pause the video if I speak too quickly for the students to write. And I know I just did. Number 2, surround non-restrictive clauses and appositives with commas. As a general rule, any part of a sentence that can be removed without changing the sentence's fundamental meaning must be bracketed by commas. Do not use commas around a clause that clarifies the specific thing you're talking about. Do use commas if it merely comments on a clearly defined noun. The word which always takes a comma. The word that never takes a comma. Okay, teachers, pause again, please. If you aren't sure whether a part of a sentence needs to be surrounded by commas, try crossing it out. If the sentence still makes sense, then the commas are needed. If it doesn't, then they aren't. Again, if a phrase can be removed without changing the meaning of the sentence, it needs to be surrounded by commas. Okay, teachers, pause again. Number 3, surround interjections with commas. If you see transition words like of course or however interrupting a clause of the sentence, it needs to be set off with commas. Pause again. Okay, now that we are done reviewing the first 3 rules, let's look at rules 4, 5, and 6. Number 4, introductions and commas. Now that we've covered when to use commas with phrases and clauses inside the main clause of a sentence, let's discuss when you need commas to separate clauses and phrases that come at the beginning of a sentence. The short answer, always. The basic rule for using commas with introductions is that any time a sentence starts with a dependent clause or modifying phrase, it must be followed by a comma. Examples. Even though I was tired, comma, Jenny convinced me to go to the strawberry festival. In the library, comma, she found the books she needed. Weird looking as it was, comma, the lizard was sort of cute. In each of these examples, the underlined portion serves to introduce an independent clause. Weirdly, if you reverse the order of the sentence, you usually don't need the comma anymore. Jenny convinced me to go to the strawberry festival even though I was tired. No comma. She found the book she needed in the library. No comma. The third example sentence is a slightly different case, since you can't actually put the underlined clause at the end of the sentence. It's a modifier and thus needs to be next to what it is describing, which in this case is the lizard. You can, however, move it into the sentence. The lizard, weird looking as it was sort of cute. Any idea what this version of the sentence is missing? That's right, a comma on either side of weird looking as it was, which could be removed without fundamentally altering the meaning of the sentence. The correctly punctuated version looks like this. The lizard, comma, weird looking as it was, comma, was sort of cute. ACT applications. The ACT rarely tests the introduction rule directly. Instead, you'll usually see it come up in questions that have multiple phrases or clauses strung together. Take a look at the following example. The next morning, using twigs for kindling, she starts a blaze in the firebox located directly below the main chamber. The next morning is an introductory phrase, so it must be followed by a comma. This rules out answer D, morning using twigs, comma, for kindling, comma. Answer choice C has an improperly placed semicolon, so we can eliminate it as well. Now we just have to decide whether the commas should surround using twigs or using twigs for kindling. Let's try each version with our strike-through strategy from the last section. The next morning, for kindling, she starts a small blaze. Well, that one didn't make sense. The next morning, she starts a small blaze. That one did make sense. Answer B is clearly the correct choice since it correctly punctuates both the next morning and using twigs for kindling. When dealing with commas, always remember that when you surround something with commas, you are telling the reader that it can be removed without altering the main point of the sentence. Number 4, connecting independent clauses. The other main case where you need commas to separate clauses is when you use a coordinating conjunction to connect independent clauses. If you have two independent clauses and want to combine them into one sentence, you can use a comma and a coordinating conjunction, or fanboys, for and nor but or yet so, instead of a semicolon. You probably use this construction correctly all the time without even thinking about it. I wanted to go hiking, comma, but it was pouring rain all day. The important thing to remember is that using a comma, no fanboys, to connect two independent clauses is absolutely always incorrect. The comma isn't interchangeable with a semicolon. This mistake is called a comma splice, and it's one of the most common errors students make on the ACT English. A semicolon is what is used to connect two complete clauses, not a comma. Incorrect. I had a terrible case of the flu, comma, my mom brought me chicken noodle soup in bed. Correct. I had a terrible case of the flu, comma, so my mom bought me chicken noodle soup in bed. Or the other correct, I had a terrible case of the flu, semicolon, my mom brought me chicken noodle soup in bed. ACT applications. On the ACT, this comma rule is usually tested in the context of other types of punctuation or in terms of identifying independent and dependent clauses. Number 5, lists. The last comma rule is likely the one you're most familiar with. In lists of 3 or more items, you must place a comma after every item except the last. It really as simple as that, as you can see in the examples below. The pirate loves going to Barbados because there's so much to do, comma, including shopping for eye patches, comma, sharpening his sword, comma, and visiting the pub. Today, comma, I'm going to skip school, comma, go to the movies, comma, and eat a giant bag of popcorn. Note that on the ACT, you must use the Oxford comma or series comma, which goes before the and. You may not like the Oxford comma, but you still have to use it. List of 2 items. The ACT writers won't give you a bunch of lists with no commas in them. Instead, they'll try to trick you in subtler ways. After looking at the last 2 rules, you might assume that you need to put a comma anywhere you see and, but that's not the case. If and or any other coordinating conjunction is connecting 2 things and that are not independent clauses, then don't use a comma. James and his brother traveled to Oregon and Washington. The ACT writer's other favorite trick is to give you lists that don't look like lists because each item is so long. Yesterday, Talia went on a boring first date that she left early and plotted to take over the world using nothing but duct tape and string. You don't need commas in either of these cases because they are lists of only 2 things. Lists of adjectives. This is a slightly different type of list, but it does come up on the ACT occasionally. If you have more than one adjective in front of a noun or pronoun and their order doesn't matter, then you need to put a comma in between them. Let's look at 2 examples, one where you need a comma and one where you don't. The hot, dry desert. The first female astronaut. Which one do you think needs a comma? If you're not sure, check whether the examples make sense with the order of the adjectives reversed. The dry, hot desert. The female first astronaut. The first example makes perfect sense with the new word order, so it does need a comma. The hot, comma, dry desert. The second, however, doesn't work when the order of the adjectives is switched, so no comma is needed. The first female astronaut is correct. ACT applications. As I mentioned above, ACT questions about lists tend to try to throw you off by adding in complicated factors like lots of extra words or commas being used for another purpose. Let's take a look at an example of this. Sealing the remaining heat inside. In a few days, when the kiln is cooled, Ellen opens the chamber, revealing the results of her labor and of the friar's magic. It may seem like you need a comma after labor, but this sentence is actually correct as written. It is a list of two things, of her labor and of the fire's magic. A, no change is the correct choice. The other answers only complicate the sentence. This question also deals with parallelism, which you can learn more about here, or we'll actually deal with in a later lesson. Remember the fundamental rule of commas? When in doubt, leave it out. When not to use a comma. Let's go over the nots that you need to know. Between a subject and a verb. Commas exist to clarify the relationships between clauses and phrases, so it is never correct to stick one in the middle of a single thought, before or after a preposition. Another place you may think you need commas is at the beginning of prepositional phrases. After all, I just said that commas should only be used to separate clauses and phrases. However, on the ACT, it is never correct to place a comma after a preposition, and very rarely correct to place one before a preposition. Around an emphatic pronoun. What on earth, you're wondering, is an emphatic pronoun? The emphatic pronouns are myself, yourself, herself, himself, itself, ourselves, yourselves, and themselves when they are used immediately after a noun or other pronoun. So let's work one together. This is one of the number one on your sheet of questions. So flip it over if you are still on the fill in the blank side. So on the other side, this is your first question. The restaurant is at the end of an alley, and if you sit on the last stool by the window, you can see the big public fountain in the adjacent window. What do you think? Take a minute, discuss among yourselves. What do you think the answer is? Is it A, no change? B, fountain in? C, fountain in, comma? Or D, fountain semicolon in? And the answer is C. The prepositional phrase introduced by in modifies fountain and cannot be divided by a comma. Once again, this is that good old rule that you do not put a comma around prepositions. Another answer choice, J, can be eliminated because of a semicolon. It should only be used to separate two independent clauses. So it's your turn. Complete the remaining ACT questions marked in your packet. Work with a partner if you wish. Be sure and talk about why you choose your answer. That is how you're going to learn, okay? Use your neighbors. Y'all talk about why you chose something or another so that maybe you'll remember when you're going through the ACT. The answers are coming up in the video, so teachers, you want to pause the video here and allow students to work the answers. When you are finished working answers, you can unpause. I'm not going to read the answers to them, but you can. So I'm going to let it run for a few minutes so that you can have the answers there for you. All right, so pause this and get to work. All right, thank you, Raiders. Have a great day.